Welcome back to Turbulent Beauty. Our next guest, Dawn, is somebody who reached out to us after listening to our first episode. And there was something about that first episode that really struck a chord for her. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Not doing too bad. You contacted me after you heard the first episode, and in your first line with your email said that it really, really struck a chord with you. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about what it was that hit you and talk a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Well, I'm almost 50. I came to understand who I was and what my sexuality was at a much later date than a lot of people these days seem to. I should have known a lot earlier, but I grew up in a really kind of a conservative family. Well, my family wasn't conservative, but my coming of age was. And I just kind of pushed that aside for a long time. And so it took a while for me to really accept that I am bisexual and the circumstances that surrounded it. And so hearing some of the things that Brittany had to say, especially having been married to a man, and you kind of hide in that area. And if you're not accepting of who you are, you just assume that there's something that you're just not quite catching. And she talked a lot about not feeling gay enough to be gay and not straight enough to really fit into the straight world either. And that really, I felt that as somebody who came to it older, it's not like I went through a lot of the struggles that people my age who came out young did. And so I don't feel like I can identify with some of the struggles that they went through. And at the same time, my struggle was a little different, but it was still kind of there, but in a different way. And kind of exploring what that means when you're older has a different from what I've seen and read and heard from other LGBTQ people. It just is, there's just a different flavor to it when you're coming into it and exploring it older. And when you come from a very conservative background, I don't feel like I can claim to be gay because I haven't lived that struggle, that experience that other people did. And people still see me as a straight person because I am married to a man. So I can, for lack of a better word, hide within that image. And sometimes that's good and helpful for me, and sometimes it's not.
Yet there is a fair amount of struggle in the life that you led up until this point, right? Like while you say that there's that hiding part, like you can hide, that's not without a lot of struggle and a lot of turmoil. And that's some big stuff there. You and I had talked off camera earlier about what that struggle looked like and what that struggle was for you. And I would love it if you could share some of that here.
Sure. Like I said, I had grew up in a family that was sort of conservative it was in a strange way. My mother and my stepfather were not religious when I was young. In fact, my stepfather I identified as an atheist, but my mother had studied all religions and pretty much rejected all of them. And as I was growing up, religion was a thing that was not accepted in my household. But I was very much searching for an identity, for a place to belong, because I didn't belong in my family. I didn't feel accepted or loved for who I was. And so everything from my earliest childhood felt like I was struggling to fit in somehow. And when I was exposed to religion through my aunt and my grandmother, that felt like a place where even though I wasn't accepted at home, I kind of felt like I wasn't no matter what anyway. So might as well see if I could feel accepted in this religious space. And as I got older, I was really hungering and searching for direction. And the only things that I really knew about religion came directly from the Bible and from the infrequent times I went to church with my aunt and my grandmother. But then when I turned 16, my mother had become a teacher, and her first teaching job, ironically, was at a very small private Christian school. And so all of a sudden I was going to Bible classes every day for the next 3 years. And so that's kind of where my coming of age as a very religious person became me. I found my identity at the beginning, a very welcoming place, because when you are new to the faith, everything is about trying to help you learn and grow and be spiritual and learn the principles. And everybody's they're all about teaching the new believer and guiding them. And so it's a very welcoming place on the surface. It isn't until you take a hard look at some of those teachings and you don't tend to look hard when you're a newbie because you're trying to soak it all in. Your new tribe is wanting you to follow their rules. And so you do it without a lot of question. And so I became a very conservative Republican voter. If you wanted to be a good Christian, you were a Republican. That was how it went.
Yikes.
Yeah. Anything else was just unthinkable. We are not going to talk about people like Jimmy Carter, who has lived a Christian life in practice as well as in word, and yet he's a Democrat. Oh, heavens, no. And that's who I identified as for the majority of my life. I'd say up until my early 30s. I got married to a man who was a youth pastor, and we started a family, and I started raising my children within the church. And so it really wasn't until my marriage fell apart that I took a hard look, and I'd felt some deep stirrings of some of these things that I espouse is not right, because as like gay marriage came into the discussion politically and things like that, there were parts of me that had a knee-jerk, well, this is not right. This is not okay. This is a sin. All of that stuff that I was internalizing from a very young age. But there was also a part of me that kind of knew that was not okay for me to react like that. And when my marriage fell apart, I decided to open myself up to all things and really re-explore what I thought, what I knew, and who I am.
What did that journey look like? The marriage ended. You have 3 daughters, right? You have 3 daughters with your ex. And
yes.
So what happened, like when you said you opened yourself to all things? What was that?
First, my ex and I had not been intimate in a very long time. And for a while, that was a very repressed part of me. And I didn't look at it. I didn't think about it. But when I did finally start looking at it and thinking about it, I remembered and realized that I have always been attracted to women as well as to men. You know, I, at one point, before I got married, I had confessed this to my ex-husband when he was still a youth pastor. And I had said, what do I do? I'm ashamed. And because at the time that was just, that was anathema. And he basically poo-pooed it and said, don't worry. It's just the devil trying to get you to go down a dark path. We'll just pray about it and keep doing the good things and the good works and being close to the Lord, and it'll be fine. And so I just built that wall and lived behind that wall for a very long time. So when we split up and I started having sexual feelings again, they were for both genders. And at first I had that knee-jerk, horrified, oh no. And then because I had decided to be more open about things and reimagine what is my life going to be like from here on out, I really started reading and looking into, can you be a believer and still be not straight? What does that look like? What does the Bible really say? What is it that people have interpreted it to say? What does that mean? Can you still have a spiritual life, be a spiritual person, be a good person, and be something other than straight cisgender? The more I read, the more I became convinced that I wasn't broken, I wasn't made wrong, I wasn't bad. I had just built up a wall about who I really was. And I started taking that wall down to see, what do I really think about these things? What are the things that my coming of age and the environment that I lived in for so long, what are the things that I actually do still believe in? What do they mean for my life? And what do they mean for these young people that I'm raising? And I changed my mind about a whole lot of things. And I started exploring my sexuality. I didn't come out to my children, not for a very, very, very long time, but I started dating and I dated some men. And yeah, you guess you could kind of call it I dated some women. I went on a sex site and made a profile and explored my sexuality. And I just realized that, yeah, I can still be a person of faith. My faith looks a little different than what one would normally associate with Christianity, but I think it's a truer faith. I think that I am able to be true to who God made me to be and not hide behind a wall and be repressed like I was for so very long. And I think that allowed me to have a different perspective on raising my children and what that meant for their lives and their futures.
So you still consider yourself to be Christian? Or do you consider yourself to be spiritual?
Yeah, I think when we talked, I said spiritual, and that really is where I tend to lean more towards these days because I'm not locked into the term Christian. And there's several reasons for that. In my daily life, in my job, I interact with people of all different faith and backgrounds, and I very much have embraced the mama bear aspect of my life. I've always felt very protective for people. And now that I am accepting my bisexuality, I'm accepting of many different aspects of myself. And I don't ever want anybody else to not feel accepted for who they are. And it's been my experience that if I am more loud and forthright about my Christianity, the people that have had bad experiences with it, and that's historically been LGBTQ, they have a knee-jerk negative reaction, and I don't want that for them. I want to protect their feelings, and I want them to be able to hear the words and the encouragement and my heart for them before the Christian word shuts it down for them.
Yeah, I get that. I think that that's a safe line to take for sure, because I know for me, having grown up in a religious home and having a mom who was pretty much fanatical in her religion, and the minute I could escape that, I did and went the agnostic route. And I've worked in certain small towns that have a really strong Christian following, and I just avoid having that conversation. If somebody wants to assume that I believe the same way that they are, I'm not going to change their mind when it comes to Christianity. And if in our conversations I'm talking about spiritual things, they make assumptions, I don't necessarily correct them. But when I'm talking to somebody who is a part of my community, of the LGBTQ plus community, I wait for somebody else to bring it up before I start to share about what my spiritual leanings might be. I don't necessarily consider myself Christian. That's not a term that's ever come out of my mouth. Well, not since I escaped my mother, but I definitely have a strong spiritual leaning. I mean, I know that I didn't create me, right? So, and I know that there's something out there that is much larger than me that created this world that we live in, good, bad, or indifferent. And so, yeah, I hear you on that. My ears plug up when somebody starts the conversation talking about Jesus and God and religion and everything. I just can't hear what they say after that, even if it's going to be something good. I miss it.
And that's exactly why I don't necessarily identify as Christian. It is my background, and I still hold a lot of the principles. But in looking at other religions, there is a common thread. Don't be a dick to each other. That whole golden rule thing. Well, all religions have that thought process. Be good to each other, treat each other with fairness, help each other. And those things are all a common human thing. And so I don't need the rigidity of I am a Jesus follower. I don't really identify with that as much. It is still the words that I use here and there. When I'm praying, I often pray the way I did before. It's just that in my mind and in my heart, it's a much bigger, more open image. I think of God. I think of not a manly figure. I think of a man, woman ish, because it says we're made in his image. And at least the Bible says that. And in his image, we are women. So there's a feminine aspect there too. So I'm okay with the idea of Gaia, the goddess, and, some of these more pagan thoughts. I feel closer to God, whatever you want to call it, in nature anyways. I don't feel close within a church building, so I don't attend church like I used to. It's my whole spirituality has shifted. So I still have the ability to discuss things from that Christian background with those who wish to speak that way. And that's been a blessing in my job. I can pray for somebody, who wants it, but generally have some sort of rainbow on me at some point. My phone has a rainbow image on it. And so I try and make that prominent so that, the rainbow can know that I'm there for them and that I can talk to them too and share with them. And I generally do. The older I get, the more kind of say, F it, I am going to be who I am and I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm bi. It might not be the first thing I say, but if I have, somebody who's not straight, not cis, I'm going to try and make them feel welcome and know that I am a part of them and they are a part of me.
That's really nice. And by the way, you can say fuck on here. It's quite all right. Let the fucks fly.
Good.
I do not edit out any fucks.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, what good Christian do you know says fuck?
Well, not enough of them, that's for sure.
Well,
Exactly.
that needs to change.
So back to your family. So you said that you didn't come out to your kids right away. How long would you say into this journey was it before you came out to your kids?
It was probably my early to mid 30s. My kids were still fairly young. My youngest was 5 when I split from their father, and my oldest was close to 10. And I felt they were a little too young at that time to understand. I was still raising them within the church. I was still kind of exploring myself. So it really wasn't until they were quite grown. I'm fairly certain my oldest had graduated before I said anything to them. They did continue to go to church with their father and with me. It's probably only been within the last 5 years that I have backed off church. They were raised within the church much of their life. After I started accepting myself, I was focused on encouraging them to have more open minds than what they were seeing in church. And frankly, because we live in a very small Christian community, they see it at the public school too. It's everywhere where we are. It's just our environment to be very, you're a Christian and this is what's right. And so I was trying hard to help them to have more open minds, to make different thought processes, but without it being, hey, I have to think this way because my mom is gay, or no, because of whatever. I wanted them to make those decisions for themselves and to have that open mind. And they did. And they started coming out to me before I ever came out to them. Pretty much all of them.
What an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising. I mean, in the process, I got remarried, but I was not open to them. We would kind of joke around and stuff, and we would watch movies about gay characters. And, I generally tried to say positive things and not toe the whole Protestant Christian line. Well, I guess it's not Protestant. It's just the Christian line that, hey, homosexuality is bad and evil and all of that. And so I very much tried to counter if we came across that. I would share with them some of the things that I had read. There's a movie out that's kind of a small independent film that there are a lot of scholars that believe the Bible was mistranslated and that where it talks about homosexuals, The original translation was actually saying pedophiles. So that's not a well-known thing. It's becoming more known that there is this possibility. I shared with them that my feelings and struggles and wonders about the whole man translating what God said, that man tends to screw things up every turn we get. And so there's a good possibility in my mind that the Bible did get mistranslated, that where it wasn't mistranslated, maybe it was misused. I mean, the Christian church has done a lot of really shitty things over the centuries. I told my children that this attitude towards anybody who's not a straight, white, cisgender man is historically difficult for me to accept anymore. The things that they've done and said have held people down rather than raised them up. They've judged people rather than embraced them and lifted them up. And that I can no longer associate with those things. My children over time expressed to me that they were not necessarily straight or cisgender. And it was only after a period of time that I finally kind of was like, well, I'm not exactly straight either.
Who came out first? Did the oldest one come out to you first?
I think it might have been my middle girl, who isn't a girl, but allows me to call her a girl. My middle is Ace. She is interesting and amazing. And I asked if I should call her by different pronouns. And she said, no, it's what I'm used to. It's fine. So we still do. And because we are in a very small, conservative Christian town, it's safer for them. So hence why we're not like identifying where and all of that. They still identify in this community as their born gender. My oldest, sometime after that, expressed that she thought she was maybe asexual as well, but she wants a romantic relationship with someone of either gender. So she's biromantic. For a long, long time, my youngest had said she was straight, and it's only been within the last year. Like, well, actually, I'm actually bi too. And so that was kind of a surprise because we were sitting in the car talking, and we were talking about, different things. And we had joked about me and my sexuality. And I don't remember exactly how it came out, but I'd said, well, you're the only straight one in the family. And she kind of went, no, I'm not. And I was like, well, since when? She's like, I don't know, forever. So we could have told me I'm kind of a safe space.
I imagine it's a challenging place to be as a parent, the world that's out there that is, we've had this nice kind of period of time where it was more broadly accepted. And now there's fear that some of our rights are going to be starting to be taken away.
No, it's all going to hell again.
Yeah. And so when you have kids, so we're talking now young adults, early 20s, that has to be also a little bit terrifying for you to now have children that identify as one non-binary and ace, another who is ace and biromantic, and another person who is bisexual in the world that we have today or possibly approaching. So the important thing is, how do we continue to give them ownership of who they are and safe space and not allow the world to crush them, right?
Yeah, it's a scary thing.
There's the mama bear in you that for a lot of the gay youth that you come in contact with. And then there's a different mama bear that has to do with your own kids. And how do you talk to your kids about that? How do you talk to your kids about what the world is like?
Well, we first acknowledge that it is happening. There's no sense in burying your head in the sand. That's something that I'm very, very fierce about in all aspects to everyone, is that you can't pretend something isn't happening. I mean, that was my whole life, was pretending that the world was better than it was. So pretending that things aren't happening doesn't fix it. It just allows the bad people, the bad things, a space to flourish. So we look at what's happening politically, we look at what's happening economically, environmentally, and we talk a lot about the different things that are happening. And sometimes it feels really, really overwhelming, and that's important to acknowledge as well. that we go through phases when we feel we can do things versus when we feel we can't. And I very much believe in every person doing their part, whatever that part is. So for me, I use my job to try and make a safe space for patients of every kind. My lovely rainbow people, I am very open with who I am, where I've been, the struggles I've been through. And I try to reassure them that I am there for them, that I'm a safe space, that I'm fighting for them. And then I encourage people, especially with my kids, I encourage people to back it up with voting, with showing up, with being there. I'm in several different advocacy groups on social media. I marched in one of the pride parades before COVID happened with the free mom hugs. And it was a beautiful, beautiful experience, hugging people all around along the parade route, trying to just give them love and let them know that there are people out there that accept them as they are, who they are inside, how they choose to live their life. I took my kids with me. They were a part of this with me. When the BLM movements were happening, my tiny community, some young people rallied together and marched from one end of town to the other, just trying to share their experiences and raise awareness that this tiny community has some issues that it needs to basically open their eyes to and realize that they have issues. This community is really good at hiding it. And so how can you ignore several hundred people marching from one end of town to the other? So I drove a security car for the parade at the end, and I had all my kids with me. And we did that for 2 separate small groups. And we were met with a lot of resistance in the bigger march. So I think it's important for people to see that, to stand up, to speak when you can. Don't put yourself in danger, but at the same time, sometimes accept that sometimes you might have to be a little bit in danger. And because I look the way I do, because my life looks the way it does, sometimes I can get away with those things more than someone else. So I'm a white woman. I can speak to other white people about why BIPOC things matter and why we need to look that history in the face and say, no, this is not acceptable. We need to change this and be more open. We need to make things more equitable. For my rainbow family, that's showing up and doing things, being visible for them, even if I look like I'm not part of the family. To the ones that I share that with, I can say, look, it gets better. It's okay. You can be who you are. And for the ones that maybe come from that narrow-minded space, I can say, why can't the rainbow be for everyone? Why can't it be a symbol of love and acceptance for everyone? So I try and navigate my weird gray space in a way that I hope will make a ripple in my pond. I very much believe in one person doing good can affect another person who then affects another person, and it becomes a snowball effect. So you start where you can, you do the best you can with what you have, with what you know, when you have it, and that somewhere down the road, maybe that has become a bigger, better thing.
Yeah, somewhere down the road, like-minded people to link arms with you. And the next thing you know, you've got this big chain wall of people that are just going forward.
Yeah.
So I want to loop back to one thing to clear something up for listeners who maybe the only thing they heard at the beginning was that you were raised Republican. Are you still Republican?
No. That is a big, fat N-O. I consider myself a more fiscally conservative person, but I'm socially liberal. If there have been a few Republicans, and very few, but there have been a few worthy opposing member, a Democrat that I didn't agree with, I might have considered voting Republican. The current iteration of the Republican Party is highly problematic. It doesn't even resemble the Republican Party that I knew when I became a Republican. And looking back, I'm like, well, there's still some things about that I would not agree with, and I probably wouldn't vote for anyways. but it has taken such a drastic turn that I just don't even recognize it anymore.
Exactly. I interviewed a guest a couple of weeks ago and we talked about that and the rights that are being taken away. First, they're taking away women's rights, right? Taking away our right to proper health care and abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And once that happens, it'll be easy to steamroll over gay rights, right?
Oh, yeah. Everything. It's just a little hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah. So I know that your kids don't feel safe to be out in your community.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a place that they do feel safe, that they are able to explore who they are and be more open? Do they have that ability to do that? Obviously not in the town.
They have pockets, not in the town. They were the weirdos and the outcasts in high school. They were part of the GSA club, the Gay Straight Alliance. So they had a little community there, but for the most part, it wasn't much to speak of. At home, their dad has come a long ways. It's been a very long, slow process, but I think he's realized that if he didn't come around, he wouldn't have the relationship that he hoped for with them. They have carefully talked about things with him, and I don't know how to describe it. It's been very interesting for them. He's much better than he was. I don't think he fully understands all of their identity aspects, but he at least tries. There is that.
At least he's not turning his back on them. I think that's the important part.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, with their grandma and their grandpa, they can't be open. Their grandparents are very Republican, very conservative, and that they just can't be open. And that's a very sad space.
That's too bad. Yeah. And this is on both sides of the family?
Well, kind of. Yeah. My mother, my stepfather has passed, my father has passed on. So it's really just my mother on my side. And my mother is a very interesting person. He did a 180 from not ever allowing me to speak about God when I was young to working at a Christian school for many, many, many years. After she and I had a falling out when I was 18, and we didn't speak for 6 years. And during that time period, she became even more religious and conservative in many ways. My brothers who still lived with her have told me that for a very brief period of time, they went to the conservative church. So it's very odd for me to wrap my head around these two different people that my mother. So on the one hand, she still votes libertarian. She's a diehard libertarian. To think that she would be accepting of all of us. On the other hand, pretty good likelihood that she really would just ignore it. Because that's kind of how she is about anything uncomfortable. I know as an adult, we were visiting at her house, and Time magazine had put out an article, and they had a cover of two men in tuxedos kissing at their wedding. And she saw the cover. I don't care, but why do they have to just have it everywhere? And then she flipped it over and slammed it on the table and then walked out of the room. And yet I know she attended my uncle's marriage to another man many, many, many years prior. So she's kind of an enigma, and none of us feel comfortable talking about it with her at all.
Sounds like she has a lot of conflict as well, but that's for her to figure out.
Yeah, that's right. That's her deal.
So to wrap things up here, the life that you are living now is a more, what's the word I'm trying to find here? Certainly not suppressed. So you've got a much more well-rounded life and supporting yourself and supporting your kids. Yes. You're married to a supportive partner. To the people that are listening, what message would you put out there?
So we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I've been thinking about it since you were going to be asking me this. And as I said earlier, it applies to everyone, but it most especially applies to the LGBTQ plus community. We didn't really have time to touch on it. For a brief period, I was suicidal, and I came through that, thankfully. I know it is a struggle, and there are often times where you feel alone and you feel like nobody cares and that you don't have a place in this world. And I want people to know that you do. There are people that care, that love you for who you are, for what you are, for who you want to be, how you want to live your life. It's a matter of finding your tribe and persevering. And when you're tired, there are people that can hold you up and help you so that you have resources. There are places online like Stand in Pride, Stand in Family, Free Mom Hugs, Serendipity Duda, Home of the Mama Bears. Those are 4 to name a few. The Trevor Project. There's a lot of resources out there to help people, especially help the rainbow family. I came through my crisis and I'm a better, stronger, more fulfilled person. The Trevor Project has a line that says, it gets better. And it really, really does. It may not feel like it, but it does. You know, anybody who has struggles, I want you to reach out to somebody, to those places, if nowhere else. If you have no one else in your life, those places are there for you. And I'm here for you. You know, if somebody's listening and wants to reach out to Jill and you're in a bad place, you're struggling, you need someone to talk to, I'll be your mama bear. I'll be there for you. I'll take care of you. I'll help you. I never want anyone to feel like they are facing things alone, because you're not. You don't have to be. Somebody can be there for you. Life gets better. You just have to be strong. And when you're not strong enough, let somebody be strong for you. You can get through it and get better.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. And yes, if you want to reach out to me and I can put you in contact with Dawn, reach out to me at turbulentbeauty23@gmail.com and I can easily put you in contact with her. I'm really, really glad that you were brave enough to reach out to me and let me know how this first episode felt.
I almost didn't.
I know. I'm really glad. I'm really glad that you did. I'm glad that you hit send on the messenger.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story and the story of your family. And maybe someday your kids will be interested in sharing their voice on here, or sharing a part of their voice on here.
Mm-hmm.
I would really like that. It's nice to have families like that on here. So thank you very much.
I'm not sure you could handle all this weirdness.
I can handle a lot of weirdness. I am a teacher.
Yeah, true.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Turbulent Beauty. We're going to take a brief hiatus just for a couple of months, and we will be back soon with more amazing stories of resilience. In the meantime, what you can do is continue to upload and share Turbulent Beauty with your friends and family. Post it on social media and get the message out there. Leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave a message at turbulentbeauty23@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram.